Not everyone enjoys the game of classics collection. Assuming ownership of an antique project car entails even greater attention and commitment from the owner. But creating and repairing a vintage muscle vehicle leaves you with an experience that's unmatched. When flaunting it to loved ones, it is something to be proud of. It's undoubtedly a tale that can be shared with friends and coworkers, over supper, or over a campfire. Here are the cheapest muscle cars you can buy. Number 28, 1998 Ford Crown Victoria. With a starting used price of $1,800, the 1998 Ford Crown Victoria made it to number 28 on the list. And this is the reason why. The Ford Crown Victoria was kept under wraps for a time. The American sedan was the preferred police cruiser and taxi for almost 30 years. After it was taken out of service, the second generation, which was manufactured between 1998 and 2012, gained a lot of popularity. Used fleet vehicles were being offered for low prices, and even now, you may get a functional one in fair condition for a reasonable amount of money. With its 4.6-liter modular V8 engine, the Crown Vic has all the makings of a legitimate muscle vehicle. It was not the most performance-oriented version of the engine, with 200 to 250 horsepower available, but the under-stress machine is dependable and has excellent aftermarket support. Ultimately, the Ford Mustang GT is powered by the same engine. The Panther platform's body-on-frame construction meant handling wasn't the best, and the available 4-speed automatics weren't the most advanced either. But the Mercury Marauder was essentially a modified version of the same car, and it performed remarkably well. Number 27, 1993 Pontiac Firebird. With a starting used price of $2,700, this Firebird is something to look out for. The Chevrolet Camaro and Pontiac Firebird of the 4th generation are equivalent. The F-body platform and engine selections were the same for both variants as they were for earlier versions. The least expensive V6 engines are the base models, however they are far less powerful than the V8 models. A Firebird SLP Firehawk with a 350 horsepower LS1 V8 engine seen in Corvettes is what you should ideally aim for. On the other hand, those are costly and scarce. In 1997, the LT1 was superseded by the LT4 V8, and the dependable V6 engines with 205 horsepower were introduced. These Firebirds are still astounding even now, especially considering how much they cost. With one of the 5.7-liter V8 engines and a 6-speed manual, they can accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour, 97 kilometers an hour, in as little as 5.1 seconds, and they can reach a high speed of nearly 160 miles per hour, 258 kilometers per hour. Number 26, 2000 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. With a starting price of $3,500, this car is my personal favorite. The 6th generation Chevy Monte Carlo is one example of how difficult it may be to imagine what automakers are thinking at times. The automobile was significantly less well liked on the road, but it gained greater notoriety when it entered the NASCAR series as a racing car from Generation 4. Front-wheel drive was the cause of this. The V6 and V8 engines returned to the Monte Carlo in 1995, although the car had reverted to an economy model from a muscle car. 3.8-liter supercharged L67 V6 or 5.3-liter LS4 V8 engines powered the SS versions. Despite the fact that both engines were well-proven technology, they were only coupled to a 4-speed automatic. MotorWeek evaluated the Monte Carlo SS with the V8 and found that it could reach 60 miles per hour, 97 kilometers an hour, in 6.0 seconds, a respectable time even in this day and age. The most common issues with these vehicles are those related to the engine cooling system and electrical system. Cheap samples are widely available since they are not particularly popular. Number 25, 1988 Pontiac Firebird, $4,200. You may get a 1988 Pontiac Firebird with a V8 engine for as cheap as $4,200. Even in perfect condition, automobiles cost less than $15,000, which is half the price of an early 1970s model. Like the Chevy version, the Firebird's style has evolved over time, but it is still possible to find an attractive appearance or modify the 88 to make it seem better. In any case, it's one of the greatest cars to have as a project or showpiece in the driveway. The 1980s were generally bad for muscle vehicles of any type, and the Pontiac Firebird was no exception. The bigger V8 engines were replaced under the hoods with smaller 6-cylinder units, and the horsepower of the engines decreased. A couple 8-cylinder variants, the 305 and the 350, were still available for the Firebird in 1988. The 305 could reach 60 miles per hour from a standstill in 6.9 seconds, and it could complete the quarter-mile strip in 15.2 seconds. Number 24. 1979 Pontiac Firebird Esprit, $4,600. You would imagine that the Pontiac Firebird Esprit would be more costly when it became available because it is less well known than the standard Firebird or Trans Am. That is untrue though, as the price range for these automobiles is between $5,900 and $29,900, with better than average models commanding a premium. The 2.8-liter V6 and the 5.7-liter V8 engines that the Esprit was available with might vary in power and price depending on the type of project you may be working on. The 1979 Pontiac Firebird Esprit in V6 trim was a sluggish vehicle, extremely slow. It's not too difficult to replace the V8 engine though, given the car did arrive with one under the hood. The V6, on the other hand, can reach 60 miles per hour in 14.4 seconds, which is fast enough to slip out of traffic if you prefer style over efficiency. Number 23, 1988 Chevrolet Camaro. With a starting used price of $4,600, this Chevy looks expensive but cheap. Redesigned to cut emissions, the Chevy Camaro underwent similar changes to the majority of other models after the early 1970s. The 1988 Chevy Camaro's basic engine, a tiny 6-cylinder with respectable power, could not compete with the 305 base engine that was an option. Any engine size may be easily removed and replaced with a larger, more powerful engine, which is a prosodic feature. When the time comes to sell it off and recoup your investment, it can, of course, always be kept original, which will raise its worth. A more well-liked 350 may easily take the place of the 305, but if left alone, you could expect to get 0 to 60 times in approximately 7.4 seconds, and a quarter-mile run in up to 15.6 seconds, with a top speed of almost 91 miles per hour. The 305's maximum speed, which is attained by 190 horsepower and 240 pound-feet of torque, is an average of 149 miles per hour. Number 22, 1975 Dodge Dart Sport. Starting used price, $5,300. In 1974, the Dart Sport 360 breathed fresh life into the lineup. A 5.9-liter V8 engine with 245 horsepower propelled the most remarkable variant. Dodge chose to step it up a level by making it an option for the Sport V8, and it was marketed until the end of 1976. The Sport 360 is one of the most costly and rarest darts from that era, and as such, it is somewhat sought after on the market, with prices starting at about $20,000. A standard Dodge Dart with the less potent 5.2-liter V8 may be purchased for a lot less money though, if power and exclusivity are not desired. The track records for the 6-cylinder Dodge Dart are hard to come by online, but if you stick with the V8 and don't make any modifications, you should be able to get some respectable times. You can cover the quarter mile in around 15.7 seconds, while starting from a standstill and reaching 60 miles per hour in 7.3 seconds. Not great, but keep in mind that you can always do better. Number 21, 1986 Ford Mustang 5.0-liter, $5,400. Fox body Mustangs haven't had a good reputation throughout the years. Despite lacking the larger big blocks of earlier versions, including the 1970 Mustang Boss 427, the lightweight 5.0-liter nevertheless boasted a powerful 302 engine mated to a unique muffler setup. People glance twice when they see the unique rumbling that the H-pattern exhaust produces from the tailpipes. The SVO was produced only in relatively small quantities, therefore even though 1985 was its final year, it was not a model that could be purchased for a low price. However, for collectors and muscle car builders, the entry-level 5.0-liter is a fantastic place to start. Number 20, 2008 Pontiac G8, $5,500. Some amazing automobiles, including the final Pontiac ever built, were constructed by the Australian-American Badge Engineering team. Based on the GM Zeta platform, the Pontiac G8 was essentially a badge-engineered Holden Commodore, as GM was the owner of the Australian brand at the time. The front-wheel drive G6 was replaced by the G8, which was manufactured between 2007 and 2009. With up to 400 horsepower, the 6.0-liter L76 V8 and 6.2-liter LS3 V8 were the engines to have instead of the respectable LY7 V6 base engine. In addition to the two automatics, a 6-speed manual and a Tremec TR6060 were also offered. Number 19. 1975 Ford Maverick Grabber, $5,800. Although the Maverick isn't a real blue muscle car, the Grabber kit gave it an appearance of one. The 1975 Ford Maverick Grabber's 5.0-liter V8 engine produced 129 horsepower right out of the factory, but the 6-cylinder engines Ford supplied with this vehicle were far from strong. It's also not very spectacular, but bear in mind that the Maverick weighed less than 3,000 pounds. Because the engine did not have to work as hard, any automobile that was lighter than the others had an advantage. That might be the reason the tiny Ford Maverick Grabber could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in less than 10 seconds and complete a quarter-mile run in 15 seconds. Remember that this 302 engine is the same as the one that drove the Ford Mustang in 1975. Number 18. 1969 Mercury Marauder, $6,100. Since this list is about economical performance cars, the 1970 Mercury Cyclone, one of the most well-known classic muscle cars made by the company, will be overlooked. Alternatively, for as low as $7,900, you may have one of the next best options. Of course, depending on what is being sought for, it will not acquire a car in perfect condition because that would cost far over $16,000. The Marauder is a terrific place for someone who wants a vintage muscle vehicle to start because it is one of the least sought after Mercurys. What are your thoughts about the list? Let's have your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for staying through till the end. Be a legend. Hit the subscribe button and don't forget to watch our previous videos.